Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So today we need to fix Marguerite's bed and get her room set up. She's going through quite a bit, and I think her having her room together will really cheer her up. Now, I got this bed off of the website. It was broken, but it was a really nice design, and I thought it looked really nice. It's colored a brass color, but it's some type of metal. I just added a little Loctite glue on those ends where the headboard had come loose. And I always use the Loctite glue for metal things. I did put something under the bed to kind of brace it to make sure it stayed level while it dried. But it dried pretty quickly, and I'm really pleased at how it turned out. Never be afraid to buy broken miniatures dolls because you can always fix them. Now, in the last episode of What's Happening with the Dolls, you saw Sadie give Marguerite a beautiful bouquet of flowers, and I just wanted to show you right quick how I made those. Now, these are some flowers that are left over from my father's memorial service, and I thought they were so pretty, they were part of one of the arrangements. So I plucked off a couple of little small floral pieces, and I'm adding Mod Podge to it to preserve the little flowers. They're dried out pretty well, but I thought the Mod Podge would make them a little bit more durable. And then I tied them together with a little cluster of plastic flowers that I had, and I bound them all together with a little purple piece of ribbon and some tulle fabric that came off of a bouquet of roses that I got for Valentine's Day. I thought it added a really nice touch and made the cluster of flowers look really finished and pulled together. I told Violet we were going to choose some things to cheer Marguerite up, and she got a little overly excited. But here's the little cluster of things that I've been making for the dress shop and for the ladies of the rooming house. And so we have quite a collection now, but I have another idea for Marguerite. Now, this is a quick glance at her room before I really begin to decorate. So there's her bed, a table at the end of the bed, and an armoire for her to store her belongings during her short stay in this room. And there are her flowers that she received from Sadi. And if you haven't seen the episode of What's Happening Among the Dolls, I will leave a link in the description below. Now, although her bed came with its own mattress and pillow, she doesn't have any linen. So I need to go ahead and prepare some nice blankets and linen for her so she can rest comfortably after all the crying she's doing. So this is a lovely little mattress. Again, it came with the bed, and I washed it really gently with a little dishwashing liquid and a little ammonia just to freshen it up. So let's make her a quilt. And I guess I'm calling it a quilt. I'm actually not putting quilt batting in between, but I'm actually only going to use my fabric tack. I'm not doing any sewing dolls. So although we're setting up a sewing room and dress shop, there's actually no sewing going on here. And just to be clear, the dolls will be sewing. I won't. So I just added fabric tack to the edge of this fabric. I pressed it together. And again, I used my tiny clover iron to press those seams to cure the glue. And I created what looks like a little tiny pillowcase. And after I turned it right side out, I straightened it out and made sure all of my corners were pulled all the way out nice and neatly. Now I did use my little pointed tool to make sure I pulled my corners out, because sometimes if they're not pulled all the way out, dolls, your blanket will look small or it will look rumpled up. And you want it to lay nice and flat and really neat. Now you see I used contrasting fabrics to give a little visual interest to the little quilt. And you see me here just pulling out those little corners. And after I made it, I just kind of laid it on top of the bed to make sure it dropped like I wanted it to. I wanted it to almost drag on the floor. Now, this is the portion where I began to make the little hem to close off the top of the quilt. Now, I didn't measure that little part. I just folded it where it bended so it would be even with the rest of the hem, and just began to iron it down so it would be nice and flat, and it actually helps to cure the glue as well. Now, be very, very careful if you ever use a clover iron. It is unforgivingly hot, and make sure you have somewhere safe to put it in between the times when you're using it, because it will melt just about anything. Dolls, always practice safety when you're using any type of tools, because I don't want any of my dolls getting burned or starting any fires. Now, after I ironed it a little bit to get some of the general wrinkles out and to cure the glue around the hem, And I did take a little extra care when I flipped it over on the right side because I did want the surface of the bed to look really smooth and neat because we're about to go ahead and actually put it on the bed and style it. Now, those in some instances, I do add another fabric on top of the mattress, but for Marguerite, I'm not doing that because the mattress looked really nice and I thought it resembled clean linen. So I just left it. And I proceeded to fit the quilt on the bed, just tucking it around the footboard and tucking it under the mattress to make sure it fit nicely. And I did use the iron a little bit to just kind of encourage the bend of the fabric along the sides before I do my water and glue treatment on the fabric. Marguerite's bed is already starting to look really cute. I really like the way her little pillow coordinates with the underside of the quilt. Now, that was after I decided how I wanted everything to lay. I did take the mattress off and I covered it in plastic because I don't want it to get wet while I'm creating the drape effect on the bed. Now, this is like a Ziploc bag that I have the little mattress on. I've pushed all the air out of it. And this is a little cup of water that I have here. I'm going to use some Elmer's glue. Now, dolls, I don't really measure too much in any instance. I just put a couple globs of the Elmer's glue in the little plastic cup, and I added some water and stirred it up really good. Now, so dolls, keep in mind, the more glue you add, the firmer or harder your fabric will become. My general rule is 3 parts water to 1 part glue, although that doesn't seem to be what's happening here. Now, I did try to add a little bit extra water to just kind of thin the glue out because I don't want it to be super hard, but I want it to be firm enough to maintain the shape that I create on the bed. Now, here I am readjusting the little quilt onto the bed on top of the plastic bag. Now, I am going to, after I add my water and glue solution, I'm going to allow it to dry on the bag. So don't worry, it will take the shape and you will be able to reposition it after you remove the mattress from the bag. Now, dolls, there are several different ways that I dress beds. I will leave a link for another technique. Now, actually, it really wouldn't be a problem if I got the mattress wet. I just don't want to because I may want to change or do something different with this bed at a later time. So this is a temporary look for me for this bed. So that's why I'm actually doing this, because I'm not set that this will be the permanent look for this bed. So you see, dolls, I just wet the sides of the bed where it drapes and allowed it to dry overnight. Now here it is after it's dried overnight, and you can see the firmness based on how it looks when I lift it up. It's almost like a little shell. Now that the little quilt is dry, let's take out the mattress and fit everything all together. And this is why I really love the water and glue solution, because it keeps the shape of the blanket. I put a few little crunches or gathers there around the top just to make it look a little bit more natural. Now, dolls, although I really did like the pillow that came with the bed, I felt like it would be nice if Marguerite had an additional pillow to go behind the other one so she'll be really, really comfortable. So I used the fabric that I used for the underside of the quilt, and I just made a small pillowcase. Now, in this instance, I did decide to add a little lace trim along one of the edges. Now, dolls, when you add the lace trim, you can either add it on one side or on 2 sides. When I was growing up, our pillowcases didn't have any lace, but I just thought it would make it look a little bit more decorative. Now, I did stuff the little pillow with some loose quilt batting and just tucked it. I didn't make it really big, really super poofy, because I wouldn't imagine that a rooming house pillow would be that huge and puffy. Now, dolls, this is the exact same technique that I used for the quilt, but I just did it in a smaller scale to do the pillow. Now, if you want to make an interior pillow and actually use this as a pillowcase, you definitely can do that. But I just glued the pillow closed at the end where the lace was. Now, after I glued it, I did tap it down a little bit with the iron to make sure that the glue cured quickly. And in the midst of it, I really liked that lace on the end and actually decided to add it on the other side as well. I think this turned out really cute. So let's go back and try it in Marguerite's room and see how it looks. The ladies are straightening out her bed and cleaning out her armoire. And I see Uncle Barley and Elbert brought up her trunk and her luggage. I think it's really sweet how everybody's working together to make things comfortable for Marguerite. I wonder where she is. It seems like she disappeared right after dinner. I also wonder what's inside her trunk. I see they also brought her bouquet of flowers and laid it on her bed. I sure would like to read that book on her table. After things settled down in the rooming house, I realized Marguerite wasn't in there at all, and I found her across the room in the original dollhouse. Marguerite was having tea with Aunt Charlotte. Aunt Charlotte is Uncle Barley's wife, and little Tracy had waited inside the laundry room until after the big blowout about Sadie giving Marguerite flowers, and she invited Marguerite over to her house to meet Aunt Charlotte. You see, little Tracy lives with Aunt Charlotte and Uncle Barley and their daughter named Chloe. They're being raised together as sisters, although they're cousins. Marguerite was really glad to spend some time with Aunt Charlotte, and although Charlotte was a little bit older than her, she was beautiful and married and had a wonderful life here in the original dollhouse with Uncle Barley. Charlotte even encouraged Marguerite and let her know that Aunt Bess had given Uncle Barley a hard time too when she first met him and they started to court. After further conversation, Marguerite realized that Aunt Bess was Aunt Charlotte's grandmother. After hearing that, Marguerite was certain that Charlotte understood how she felt. Marguerite expressed to Charlotte that she had forgotten some of her toiletry items. Charlotte allowed Tracy and little Chloe to go into their bedroom and play and keep the babies while her and Marguerite talked. And she also allowed Tracy to hold the baby as long as they kept the door open. Charlotte assured Marguerite that she had no need to be concerned or worried. Charlotte filled a box for Marguerite full of all the things that she would need during her stay at the rooming house, and she also advised Marguerite to walk carefully because the items she gave her were very fragile and they could break. Marguerite was so grateful that Charlotte had been so kind and so generous with her. Charlotte urged Marguerite that it was time for her to go because it wasn't proper for a young lady to be out after dark. She advised her that Uncle Barley would be home soon to escort her back to the rooming house.